Fritz Ermarth served as chairman of the National Intelligence Council during the Cold War. He was responsible for producing national intelligence estimates on nuclear and other threats to the United States. As the NIC chairman, Fritz was the nation's top intelligence officer. He was an intelligence hero whose estimates of the USSR got us through the Cold War without it becoming a nuclear war. Fritz Ermarth is widely respected and is one of the nation's most profound and prescient strategic thinkers, one who sees the big picture and sees further down the road than most and correctly anticipates where those dangers are.
The nature of the catastrophe. It's very important that you take this aboard. You know, somebody early on said it would throw us back into the 19th century. 18th century? 17th century? No. It would throw us into an experience for which there is no precedent, because as someone else said, you know, we don't have the stuff and the infrastructure around to run the 19th century. It's all in the Smithsonian or gone. We would be thrown into a truly unprecedented situation, the like of which may be faintly comprehended if you look at, you know, Berlin at the end of World War II. We would see not only a massive physical breakdown leading to massive human suffering, but a social, moral, legal breakdown. Can one deal with that? You know, as to the physical. How many in this conference room have the skills, tools, and residence locale to go kill a deer within 24 hours to feed your family? Says something about where we are. Imagine that this conference hall was filled with the citizens of District of Columbia, or Manhattan, or San Francisco, or Los Angeles, right? A massive, unprecedented breakdown. Maybe there's something in the repertoire of Hollywood that gets at this, but I don't watch movies much. Someone's, you know, in the literature, and I think mentioned somewhere here in the program, was a statement that, well, you know, when this thing goes off over Kansas and shuts down the electric power grill, nobody immediately would get killed, and after some hours, people would start dying in hospital. Well, how about all those people in airplanes across the country in the middle of the day? We're talking about 500,000 people, a lot of whom would hit the ground, crash and burn. No, a massive, unprecedented catastrophe. It's really important to take aboard, when you're looking at the strategic context, that this is kind of not minimum, but maximum assured destruction. A very small, a small competent country or adversary with 1 or 2 or 3 weapons could accomplish. This is just, completely different from the Cold War context. Which leads to another and by the way, the contrast between EMP at altitude and a truck-delivered nuclear weapon, into the middle of a city, which, for all our protective measures, isn't all that hard, by the way. Within hours of 9/11. The President directed the Department of Energy to do a study of the threat to downtown Washington of a terrorist-delivered nuclear weapon. The Department of Energy turned to Lawrence Livermore Labs, and they turned to a little bunch of guys with whom I worked, long in the tooth, but varied in skills, some weapons guys, some strategic guys, intelligence guys. And we sat down and we worked about 18 hours a day for, 6 days to design sort of a system architecture for defending Washington. It basically involved turning the Beltway into a defense perimeter and all the entry points under or over the Beltway, including the rivers and the rails, as checkpoints for sensors of the kind that I think we had about 24 in the inventory then, these NEST detectors, these gamma detectors. In the course of that, I learned that a 10 KT weapon had to be brought within about 6 blocks of the Capitol building and set off And unless it got closer than 6 blocks, it really wouldn't do a whole lot more than blow out the windows, because so much of the energy gets delivered down or up. But at altitude, much more damaging. And an EMP weapon, an EMP attack, given the numbers 1, 2, half a dozen, vastly destructive. It's the threat of choice if your arsenal is small. Got to think a minute about the delivery operations and how that could be done. A favorite scenario of my colleague Peter Pry and the community is the ship offshore, ballistic missile loft at altitude. Another extremely important point to take aboard about the strategic context: false flag operation. Adversary country A wants to take us down for a protracted period of time while he does, some regional mischief that we would otherwise interfere with, but doesn't want to be held accountable for it. Organizes a false flag operation in which we have this ballistic missile launched off the coast into the heartland, takes us down with an EMP attack, and then there's a news release saying, well, this attack was perpetrated by the revolutionary arm of Al-Qaeda, a la this, whatever. No nuclear origin forensics available at altitude, and the country would be in pretty poor shape to do a CSI type study of the phenomenon. In any case, we wouldn't know who to retaliate against. A false flag operation is a very, very palpable threat, and there are numerous actors who do or might acquire the motivation to execute that. If I were the president, facing what I've heard today, what I know from my study of the EMP problem in years past, I know what I'd do. And here's my broad action plan for your edification and discussion. A, testing and evaluation. This is an issue of such importance that learning more is vital, even if we think we understand the gravity and severity of the threat. More testing and evaluation and analysis could illuminate weapons effects, and believe me, the last word in nuclear weapons design, especially for special effects, has not been said. We're just not doing it. Other countries are doing it. Modernization, testing, special effects. If actual testing of nuclear weapons is required to understand fully the EMP phenomenon, weapons effects, and vulnerability of various systems and subsystems, we need to do it. Hardening. We've heard a lot about hardening, and we'll hear more. Hardening and stockpiling in presumably protected storage of replacement parts to accelerate the process of restoration and recovery. And I'm reminded by being visited briefly between the sessions here by some alumni from my college out in Ohio who work in the emergency health care business, that this, quote, hardening program has a human side. We've got to develop, train, recruit, deploy responders for the EMP threat. And that's got to be laced together with the responders for other kinds of homeland security threats, BW, CW, and so forth. There's an extremely important intelligence side to this. You're not going to see this threat with an imagery satellite. You may see some pieces of it. It requires aggressive intelligence on the ground, and that includes technical intelligence to get at the threat sources. And it can't monkey around gently with potential perpetrators. Intelligence was an extremely important reason why we got through the Cold War without blowing ourselves to hell. It will be an extremely important reason why we survive, if we can, the period ahead. There's a possibility that the EMP threat is sufficiently convincing, sufficiently compelling, and sufficiently important in its own right that with the help of folks like you, we can get the word out to the country in ways that are convincing and persuasive across party lines, ideological lines, whatever, that we got a problem that we have to address. And in the addressing of this problem in a serious and urgent way, we can intelligently rope in some of the other problems that I've alluded to for amelioration.